All right, well, welcome everybody. Let's go ahead and get started. My name is Seth Stewart. Run this channel here, Truth from Earth, and this is our second human rights panel discussion. Uh, our topic today is illegal immigration and the rights of illegal immigrants. We have a battery of 10 questions prepared, and if we have any audience questions, please just go ahead and put them in the chat. Um, and yeah, let's go ahead and do those intros. Scott, do you want to give yourself a brief intro?
Sure. My name's Scott. I know Seth from college about 13 or so years ago. Um, uh, and we belong to the same church, or at least were at the time. I don't know. But yeah, it's a great opportunity. I usually like to think for myself with um, forming ideas and um, uh, yeah, growing up, uh, I was like in a right-leaning household, and yeah, um, but and I'm not too up to date on technology and different things but yeah, but I like listening to politics and different things. And the other day I commented on Seth's Facebook post, and he asked me to be on here.
Well, thanks for being here, Scott. And yeah, it's great that you think for yourself, and it's great that we're still friends because all these
Mhm.
political shenanigans and everything, I tend to lose a lot of friends. All you have to do
Mhm.
is just express an opinion online, and you automatically lose friends. It seems so. Uh,
Mhm.
it's kind of the way the world is going, unfortunately. But all right, let's go ahead and James, do you want to give yourself a quick intro?
Sure. Yeah. See, I grew up in the church, um, and I've got an interesting religious history. I'm not sure if I'm going to share that right now, but I've been learning about. I've became interested in politics things in the '90s. Started learning about what Ezra Taft Benson, President Benson at the time, said about it, and um, presidents from the past had said about it, said about the Constitution and how it should be, how we should be defending it, and upholding it and protecting it. And I would consider myself a classical liberal in that sense, um, like the founders were. Most of them would be considered classical liberals. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm coming from.
All right, well, super. Welcome, James.
Okay, thank
And
you.
I know we've had some good back and forth, some healthy dialogue before online.
Right.
Kind of a lot of my philosophical discussion and community tends to come from Facebook, which is where I've had the deepest roots. I guess I've been there almost 20 years since close to around the time that Facebook started. And yeah, like I mentioned, lost a lot of friends over politics, one way and the other. So it's kind of like I don't know, feel a little bit like Joseph Smith, rough stone rolling, knock off some rough edges every time. But it's really sad to me, honestly, that people lose friends over this stuff. But at the same time, we're continuing the war in heaven. That's kind of the theme here. Is we're still continuing that same fight for freedom here on Earth. And pardon if I can seem judgmental sometimes, but I like to do deep dives on these topics because we really do need to know our stuff. So without further ado, on the original link, there is there's a list of 10 questions. We're just going to go ahead and go through those, and the format is going to be basically we answer the question yes or no, and so it'll be a yes or no question, and some of them are just short answer questions, but and then we go around the room and we just explain what's our reasoning, why or why not, any special comments or thoughts or insights we might have, and let's just develop these ideas, get some application going. So the first question, I don't know if you guys have a preference as to order, but I was thinking let's just go. Uh, uh, Maybe I'll go first, and then Scott, and then James, and then maybe we just go round robin that way, or maybe shift who goes first. So all right, but so yeah, the first question is: does the Constitution grant any special rights to citizens? Let's go ahead and maybe do it this way. Let's each just like blurt out our answer, and then we'll go ahead and dive into any special things. Like what we would do in a classroom setting is maybe like close your eyes, head down on your desk, and then you raise your hand if your answer is yes or whatever, you know. So question number one, to repeat it again. I guess there are only three of us, so this could work. But does the Constitution grant any special rights to citizens? So we're just going to blurt it out. Just say it. So in three,
so we're
two,
not.
Yeah, what's up?
Okay. We're going.
We're just a
say...
countdown. Because I've tried the whole thumbs up and raising hands thing,
Okay.
and that doesn't show up on the live stream. So it's like not as interactive as I wanted it to be. But so we're just going to try to do that way. Or we could just raise a hand by video if we want to do that too. Should we just take a vote on
I
that right
gotcha.
now?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, sure. I understand the 3, 2, 1 thing now. We could do
Okay.
that.
Maybe we'll do a practice one just for fun. Like, do you like chocolate? And we'll go 3, 2, 1, and just say yes or no. Does that sound good?
All right.
Okay.
All right.
You like chocolate? 3, 2, 1. Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so we all agree. That's cool. The yeas have it on that one. Okay, so going to this question then: does the Constitution grant any special rights to citizens? So, 3, 2, 1. No.
Maybe.
No.
Okay. All right. Well, let's explain. I'll start with me, like I mentioned, and I'm going to go ahead and unpack my my views on this. The Constitution has what's called the Privileges and Immunities Clause. It's Article 4, Section 2, Clause 1. It says the citizens of each state shall be entitled to all privileges and immunities of the citizens in the several states. It's very interesting to me that nowhere does the Constitution actually refer to rights being conferred by the Constitution or by government on the people. That doesn't exist. And so that's actually also part of the dialogue between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. Anti-Federalists were like, let's go ahead and glue some Bill of Rights stuff onto here just so we can remember what some of those are. And I'll be honest, if the Bill of Rights weren't there, I don't think we would remember in the present generation what our rights as people are. Maybe that's false. Maybe that's I'm just arguing from where we are, right? Maybe if it weren't there, then we'd be forced to be more thoughtful about what our rights are and so on. And maybe that's an interesting exercise, just to say, if you take away the Bill of Rights and you just have the Constitution, what would people come up with? And I think a lot of that depends on their indoctrination, their upbringing, and so on. But yeah, the Declaration of Independence says that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So yeah, like when we're talking about rights, and I'm like, yeah, the Constitution doesn't grant any rights to citizens. It grants them. The government does confer privileges and immunities that are part of that social contract on the individuals who are participating in it. But rights, no, those are inherent. So that's my take on it. Scott, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. So I in classic fashion, I misread the question a bit. And so I was thinking whether you meant whether the Constitution gives rights at all. And so rather than giving rights specifically for citizens, and yeah, I would have said no. But there's another argument that I was thinking about where whether the Constitution gives rights at all, says rights at all, or it just lays the natural right, declares rights. That's sort of like a classical argument I've seen where we all have rights, and we may and they're just natural rights a person has, and that the Constitution just writes them down. I was thinking that was the question, but I see it now. It's a different sort of question. And so, yeah, the Constitution doesn't say anything specifically for citizens versus non-citizens, um, uh, like um, as of rights. And I think that that a big part of it is like, let's say someone's stopped by police or something. Maybe I'm jumping too far ahead. But like, let's say someone's stopped by police or something, and they, the person stopped by police could be a citizen or non-citizen in the eyes of the police officer. And so if the police officer would start treating everyone they stop like it as a potential non-citizen, then that could cause some trouble. Um, or that's actually a lot of rights that the Supreme Court has like laid bare throughout the years have been the result of scummy people, like maybe not the best of people, but it provides a protection for the rest of the people, I think. Anyway, sorry, I probably took too long with that answer.
That was a very good, very thoughtful answer. I'm going to want to bounce back on some of those points here, but let's, James, what do you think? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, if like you've alluded to the Declaration of Independence, and it says, all men are created equal, and we're all endowed. And when it says all men, back then that would be considered all mankind. So that's irrespective of sex or gender. So all mankind are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and we're going to set up this government, to protect the rights of all people. And just because you happen to live in an area of the world where your government doesn't defend or protect your rights, it doesn't mean you don't have them. These rights are unalienable. They cannot be taken by another, and they can't be given even by. Yeah, I just looked up the term unalienable, and it's like even the possessor can't give them away. So they can't be given and they can't be taken. They're just inherent, just because you're a member of the human family. So, and that, also, if you believe in the DNC, it talks about the same thing. DNC 98 and DNC 101 talk about these rights are for all mankind, irrespective of where you're at. So
That's right. Yeah, I love that. So I think we're all very much in agreement on this. And I notice, like, among other things, just to speak to the abortion issue, the Declaration of Independence doesn't say that all men are born equal. It doesn't say you start having rights when you're born. We're all created equal, and creation precedes our physical birth. So, and a lot of people who are not religious look at the Declaration of Independence as, oh, that's a quaint document. Oh, that's not legally binding. Whatever. I'm like, dude, these people died to secure our freedoms, right? And they even say that there. They say that to secure these rights, not to grant them, not to create them, but to secure them. In other words, to make those rights available to us, to make those rights guaranteed. That's why governments are instituted among men. And that is the sole responsibility of governments, is to protect people in their rights. And yeah, so to accomplish that, there are some various things they need to do. And we do delegate them some power, some responsibility to accomplish that. I loved your point, Scott, about traffic stop. Little example there. You really can't tell who's who in advance. It's not like, oh, this person I mean, unless they're running your license plate number or something like that, and using the DMV and vehicle registrations and cross-referencing that to some like citizenship database or something like that, then they don't actually know. And besides, who else is in the car? Who's driving it? Did you lend it to someone?
Yeah.
You just don't know. You meet a person walking down the street, and you're like, "Oh, that guy must be a non-citizen." Well, how can you tell? Well, he looks like he's from Mexico or Guatemala. There's a point where you
Yeah.
just get to racial profiling, and I'm just like, and this is something that unfortunately too many people just, I'll say it, they just don't think it through, because they've never really thought seriously about it. Unfortunately, a lot of people have never thought seriously about how do you actually enforce a law, how do you actually, act as a, you know, affirming someone's defendant rights and so on, right? Not jump to conclusions and stuff. How do you actually implement this? It's something that you can't just take it as a foregone conclusion that we magically know. Oh, look, that guy's an illegal. He's here illegally, therefore he doesn't have rights, kind of thing. I can't tell you how many times in the past 3 weeks I've heard somebody say that exact phrase or some very close variant of it, like literally just telling me they're not, like basically they're not human, and I'm just like, dude, like you need to chill out and like read the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution,
Mhm.
and these will be people who are like, oh, everything I do is constitutional. I'm a Republican, right? I'm just like,
Mhm.
sorry, and I'm not here to mock Republicans. Like, I am the most Republican person I've ever met. I'm still a hardcore Republican because I love the platform, I love the principles, but at the same time, like, we got to do some serious self introspection because there are a lot of things we just. I'll put it this way: the devil disperses truth among the parties. He gets people divided, and if somebody over there has a truth that you don't have as part of your platform, but they're the bad guy, then that makes you, hate that truth. Or, divided up the Constitution. It's like a bad uh,
Mhm.
custody arrangement. Bad
Yeah.
divorce.
Right.
I I agree. Especially like with I mean, first thing, one of the things you mentioned first is that people saying the Declaration of Independence isn't law, but it goes to the intent of the founding fathers, and the founding fathers made the Constitution, and the Constitution is like above the law. It's literally what, like, if something is unconstitutional, if a laws go against the Constitution, then the law is struck down. Um, it's declared unconstitutional. And Declaration of Independence is like one of the documents that uh, helps them read through it. Another thing was that man, I forgot my other thing I was going to say. But yeah, do you have some? You have something to say at all?
Oh, well, I guess there's a lot more we could say. We'll probably touch on a lot more of these points as we dive into
Mhm.
this. But like, yeah, I was just looking at the live stream comments or somebody who's watching who says may not have time to watch the whole show live, but hope you all have a good discussion. The Constitution's protections are based on personhood, not citizenship, and I think that's a good backdrop because
Mhm.
if somebody's argument, here's the unfortunate thing. Here's I'm just gonna just say it like I see it. The direction that this is headed is the moment we treat anybody not like a person, then we're setting ourselves up to be treated not like persons, right? If,
Right.
if if we are hurtful to others, we presume that their rights are non-existent, that governments exist to grant rights, and sorry, you're not part of this government. Like you're not part a citizen here, therefore you don't have any rights, partner. Like I would hate to go travel to some foreign country where I'm treated like that. That would be horrible. Like that would be huge human rights violations because they're rights. They're God given. Um,
Mhm.
let me go ahead and let's just go to the second question because like we could philosophize on that a lot. We kind of already did some of that philosophizing and it's truthful but we need to recognize that God is the source of rights. Governments do not grant them. Governments are just there to keep them safe, and that's their sole responsibility. So we're going to jump to question number 2 now, which is are privileges and immunities of citizens distinct from rights? Okay. So are the privileges and immunities of citizens distinct from rights? 3, 2, 1, go.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think maybe we've already explained this a lot. James, you want to go first?
Yeah, privileges. Well, yeah, we have privileges here in this country that um, are enforced only within the bounds of the country because the United States only has jurisdiction within its borders. So yeah, I can't, even if, people, we say that people outside of the US have privileges, just the same thing with rights. There's no way to enforce them outside of that. Um, so within the country, I would say we have privileges and we also have duties,
That's a great point.
which are separate from rights.
There you go.
Rights are God given, inherent, and then we've got privileges, which are kind of man given, government given. They're lesser. They're not definitely not on the same level. So
There we go. Super. Scott, what are your thoughts?
First off, I just want to make a comment about how you do things. So like you said, it was going to be like certain order, you, then me, then James. Just in the future, let's stick to that, just so
We'll stick
we
to that
know.
exact same order so that we have
At
the
least
muscle
that's
memory. Okay, cool.
that's
All
that's
right.
where my vote is.
Okay,
In
fair
any
enough.
case, um, uh, so I was just going to say, first thing that popped in my mind was, hey, they're different words. And usually when someone says a different word,
Mhm.
like they want to mean something different than what it is. And I think with rights, rights are like, they're something that people have like people just have natural rights. And so if someone is saying in the Constitution they have these privileges, maybe they're using it as a synonym where like, it could be that they mean it just like a right, or they could also mean, hey, these are privileges that like, may not be something that every person needs to have, like not something we would declare as a right, but something
Mhm.
very close. Especially because like, when you and uh but I'm not feeling strongly on like I'm not strongly held to that idea. So if you want to convince me otherwise, I'd listen to what you have to say.
Yeah, well, I think so. Privilege comes from a French word means private law,
Mhm.
and which is in contrast to public law, right? Um,
Hmm.
as in public law applies to everybody. Privilege is something I can go and grant privileges. I can go and receive privileges. No one's harmed by exchange of privileges because it's your right to confer and receive privileges, if that makes sense. You can go invite the next door neighbors to dinner. They can be from Latin America. They could be from Indonesia. They could be white. They could be black. Whatever. You can start a club for Latinos or whatever, and that's all fine because that's a privilege, right? If the public law goes so far as to prescribe things like, oh, if you're black, then you don't get to eat food or something ridiculous like that, then that's just messed up. Um, but anyway, so there's a distinction there. So just what are the privileges and immunities? I would submit, privilege number one of citizenship that we typically think of is voting. Obviously, non-citizens do not have the privilege of voting in the elections of a country to which they're not a citizen. They don't have the same representation with the government. They don't get to go and lobby for changes. They don't get to go and try to influence the politics of a foreign country. That's not legitimate. Like you know, if I go and try to visit Spain or something like that and show up to one of their town hall meetings, they shouldn't take me seriously because I'm just a tourist, just a visitor. Anyways,
Right.
that kind of thing. That's what I think of in terms of privileges. Immunities, I would think, maybe just more along the lines of, you're traveling to a foreign country and they want to grant you some immunity. They want you to have some. It's not like you're not prosecutable for the things that you do, but you have some people who are behind you, people who are in your corner specifically. Uh, another privilege is that you get to run for public office. Shouldn't have
Mhm.
non-citizens running for public office. I'm going to try to burn through the questions a little bit quicker here. Unless there are other thoughts on number two, we'll go on to number three.
Oh, well, by that case, technically, president is one of the ones that is in the Constitution that uh, applies to only people, only citizens,
That's correct.
running
It
for.
does say you have to be a
Mhm.
citizen.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
We're all elected officials. So,
Uh,
yeah.
Yep. Very good. So yeah, those are. I think it's pretty straightforward. It's not like you're not human just because you live here, but from a different country. Um, oh, as just an example, I don't know how familiar you are with this, but we brought this up in the last one, in the last discussion. But the Indian tribes, the Indian nations,
mhm,
like interestingly, up until the 1920s, I want to say, they were actually regarded as distinct nations, and I think they still are in a sense. Maybe have dual
mhm.
citizenship, but they weren't citizens of the United States for the most part,
Yeah.
unless they had had some special arrangement made, which meant we're actually very accustomed here in the United States to having non-citizens just kind of roaming around, having free passage between various states and whatnot because they'd have their tribal lands here, wherever, and they
Mhm.
wouldn't be United States citizens. They couldn't vote in our elections or whatever. They'd have their own local sovereignty and so on. So it's not like it's a totally new concept. Um, anyways,
Okay. I,
and
I, I missed, I missed that question. It froze up on me. Was that about the Native Americans?
oh, that wasn't a question. It was I was just giving a little
That
backdrop
statement.
on Native
Okay.
Americans are non-citizens who've been in the borders of the U.S. for a while. They were
Okay.
not
Yeah.
citizens, and then they were naturalized by law, I guess.
Right.
Um, all right, let's go ahead and jump to the next questions then. So, does the Fourth Amendment apply to non-citizens? I'm going to go ahead and just read the Fourth Amendment. It's so big and scary. So, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. So, all right, does the Fourth Amendment apply to non-citizens? Yes or no? Three, two, one. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Within the bounds of the United States. Yes.
Super. Um, this one's a hot topic, frankly, on social and news media right now because you do have people like uh, AOC, Alexandria Ocasio Cortez. She's kind of the poster child for she's the Democrat that a lot of Republicans like to paint as dumb and stuff on social media. And you know what? My opinion is that that's mainly theatrics, and the theatrics are designed to get us to have a distaste for the Bill of Rights. That's the
Hmm.
maneuver that's being employed. That's the psyop that's being run on American minds right now, is to get the Democrats to be in favor of defendant rights and cite the Bill of Rights, and then just have the Republicans go and tear them up because we're angry because bad stuff's happened, and both of those propositions are fundamentally flawed. Number one, yeah, you do have people who are speaking up in favor of corruption, and it's maybe their
Hmm.
motivation, uh, but for a lot of people, that's not the motivation. The motivation is no, I actually care about rights, even if somebody did break the law. Like literally half of the Bill of Rights applies to people who are accused of breaking the law, you know, or
Right.
suspected, you know.
Mhm.
And so, like, if this idea that hey, ICE shouldn't be the immigration police basically shouldn't be just showing up out of the blue unannounced and going and nabbing people without a warrant. You got to have a warrant, right? And so there's a lot of concern. I have a lot of concern about that because citizen oversight of that whole process is very much lacking, in large part because of this
Mhm.
preconception that illegal immigrants don't have rights. Right? That's basically the stance our government has taken on them. This administration is like, oh, they don't have rights. We'll just deport
True.
them. And then I press people on due process, and they get due process. They get out of here. That's due process. You know, not everyone says the exact same things. They're like, oh yeah, they get a hearing, and then they get shipped out. And I'm just like, guys. But the basic question of like, does the government still actually need a warrant to go and raid these people and go and try to you know arrest them, have a hearing, deportation, whatever? Anyways, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. So
I think so.
with that, it goes back to what I said earlier about a police stop. When a police stops you, uh, whether if being an immigrant is something they'll stop you for, and immigrants don't have rights, then if even it starts with when they suspect you of not being when they suspect you of not being a citizen or not being here legally, they could not apply the Constitution to you. The right to they'll search your stuff and be like, oh, we thought he was um, we thought he was a immigrant, or and so um, they'll apply that stuff and use it to do actions that, like, maybe they can otherwise. One, for example, one action that was a hot button topic before, like, a lot of these hot button topic, well, it's sort of not, but is the topic of civil asset forfeiture, where originally it was designed where if there was money in connection with a crime, police could seize it for themselves. And not to get into that topic, but there's some controversies of police using it to just grab the money from a person's wallet they searched. And I'm just extending that. I'm not. We're not. Let's not debate that. But um, when extending it, when a police search someone, they could just take the money out of your wallet. Oh, we thought you were a citizen. Now you have to sue. You actually would sue the money to get it back, and it's a lengthy process, and it enables it can and so, like, as we generally, sorry, I'm getting sidetracked here, but what I want to, going back to my main point, is if these things generally just chip away at our rights, we will be left with no rights at all. We'll be forced to carry identification on ourselves to prove we're um, a citizen. And then let's say we make it like we have someone we knew in high school who we grew up with who is a police officer and didn't like us in high school and pulls us over. Well, it's like, oh yeah, your documents are fake, and deports you. And this is a fear a lot of people have, like retaliation or different things like that. And um, I think especially when I think maybe it's more so for people who weren't as, like, popular growing up, like, for me, like, because I'm like, oh yeah, I definitely maybe wasn't the best person in the past, and so it's like, okay, if one of those people was a police officer, like, um, yeah. Anyway, but I think another point I mentioned was that sometimes rights are made by people who aren't necessarily the best of people, like the right to, not rights, I misspoke there, but the court says rights, like a right to the attorney. The person, I forget what case it was, but he had committed crimes in the past, and that's why police suspected him. Not generally the best person, but there was reason to be suspected, and now because of that, we have the courts have said, oh, people have a right to an attorney, um, and stuff. And yeah. Um,
You know,
sorry, I think I
yeah,
strayed from the question a bit,
I
but
think you made a lot of really good points there, though. Civil asset
mhm,
forfeiture being applied to illegal immigrants, I think that's hugely concerning, actually, because it's a very fair question of what happens to their stuff. Like, they're renting
mhm.
someplace, they have materials, they have money that they've saved up, whatever. They have a car, maybe. What's going to happen, right? You know,
Yeah.
if we normalize that kind of behavior of, oh, let's just profile this person, let's assume he's not let's assume that he's an illegal immigrant, let's assume that he's smuggling drugs, right? And therefore we can just search him without a warrant or something like that, and just take his stuff,
Mhm.
because we think he's not a citizen, or even if they can prove he's not a citizen, still just being able to just take his stuff and deport him, that sets a horrible precedent, because it's a part of it's about conditioning, frankly. If you have a police
Yeah.
force that's conditioned to the point where they're just like, okay, can we take this guy's stuff? Oh yeah, we can just totally take his stuff, and no one will ever bother us. And I'm not one of those, like, people who's like, oh, all cops are evil or whatever. I have a brother-in-law who served as a police officer and so on. So, like, I understand the difficulties and rigors of the job, but it's not made any easier when, like, the training and the conditioning and the laws and the edicts around this whole thing are structured to incentivize or let people off the hook for bad behavior. That's never a good thing. That always
Yeah,
demoralizes your law enforcement.
and I think it can be a big problem too when like when police even if I was like a really bad person and some or not a really bad person, but I had maybe I was playing basketball and I elbowed a guy and later he pulls me over or something because I don't play basketball much, so I don't know. I think elbowing may be like sort of common and like accidental or like something of that sort to make someone not like me. And he pulls me over and he's just seeing red. And do I expect that to happen often? No, but like let's say he sees red and he just heard something where like he could deport me by doing this and this, and he does it.
Right? Yeah. Could have
These are
targeting and bullying and so on. Right?
the edge cases that the Constitution, the laws want to prevent,
Yeah.
and have done for the past long while.
Yeah.
Sorry if I
Great discussion.
interrupted you there.
No, you're good. Let's go to James, and then we'll go on to question number 4. Your thoughts on Fourth Amendment?
Okay. Well, I would, since we're all agreed that the Constitution, the whole Constitution, uh, is applicable to, well, basically every person on Earth. But as we've, agreed also that it's only enforceable here in America, that it applies to everybody. Due process. Everybody has the right to due process. Um, it's I understand. I look at both sides of it. I understand that, yeah, these people, they came here uninvited, didn't come through a port of entry. A lot of them, but once they're here, then they. I know that they're okay. We're only going to prosecute them, and so we're only going to go after them if they've broken another law beyond that. But we still have to have due process. We still have, we're not Nazi Germany. We're not.
Mhm.
This isn't Germany in the 30s. This is America, and we don't believe in treating treating people as second or third class citizens. Everybody is on the same. All men are created equal, and all should be treated with dignity. There's also the presumption of innocence. That's a huge thing that we defend here in America as well.
Yeah, we'll probably get to that in a minute. I just for the sake of anybody watching, if it's second class citizens, of course, is a little bit of a loaded term when we're talking about citizenship. But in terms of human rights, like the question is, are these rights applicable to people regardless of their citizenship status? And yeah, with respect to the Fourth Amendment, second class persons, if you will, is maybe how I would editorialize that. Sorry for jumping in on that.
Mhm.
But
No, that's fine. It's good to make sure that everything's clear.
yeah,
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say if there's not more on that, because there are a lot more of defendant rights that we're going to cover, and hopefully we're not being too redundant across the different
Yeah.
topics. But so
Right.
if
So
you have any
yeah.
more thoughts on the Fourth Amendment, search and seizure warrants, probable cause.
Yeah, absolutely. That they need. We either defend. We everybody's on an equal level playing field, or they're not. We defend everybody's rights, or we violate everyone's rights. Everybody's rights are up for grabs.
Yeah.
Can't have it both ways.
Yeah, there you go. Awesome. Okay, let's go into the Fifth Amendment. I'm just going to go ahead and read it here. So the question is, does the Fifth Amendment apply to non-citizens? I'll go ahead and read it. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arriving in the land or naval forces or in the militia when in actual service in time of war or public danger, nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. So we think that applies to illegal immigrants. 3, 2, 1. Yes.
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 Okay. I'll dive into my reasoning. I mean, I've got the text of it right in front of me, but the Fifth Amendment. But, if let's say that Jose, Jose Sanchez next door, down the block or whatever, he's here illegally or whatever, and police just come and nab him and accuse him of some horrible crime. Oh, you violated this guy's daughter or something like that. I would still want there to be due process. I would still want there to. It's like that's a really serious accusation. Yeah, if he's crossed our border illegally, then yeah, he's not immune to deportation. So this is something a lot of people misunderstand when you say, "Hey, I believe in people's defendant rights." That doesn't make them immune to prosecution. It doesn't mean they automatically get mercy applied. It doesn't mean they automatically get forgiven if they did commit a crime. It doesn't mean that they have amnesty, right? Huge differences. Doesn't mean they get to be citizens, right? But it's the simple matter of wherever he's from and whatever his documentation status is, let's say he was on a work visa and it expired, whatever reason, whatever dumb reason, right? You still don't get it. Like the government still doesn't get to go and just say, oh, we think he's guilty of child trafficking and we're just going to go and yoink him away and we're going to go ahead and just not even have a presentment or indictment against him with the grand jury. The grand jury hasn't, we haven't actually gotten the citizens involved, to see, is there evidence that this guy committed this crime, that we're accusing him of. With Ilhan Omar on social media, she was accused of this because she was allegedly, teaching illegal immigrants how to avoid being deported, right? And I don't know beyond this, but as far as my understanding was what she was saying was, you're not required to tell them anything. ICE agents, Border Patrol shows up at somebody's door, you're not required to tell them anything. And then all these people on X are like, oh, what an evil person, she's abetting this. And I'm just like, guys, based on what I see in this report here, maybe there's more to it that I'm not seeing, but based on the exact things that you guys are calling out, like, she's literally just rehearsing the Fifth Amendment to them.
Right.
And here's Elon Musk on his platform saying, she should go to prison. She's committed a crime. And I'm just like, what?
What crime?
Yeah, so this is one of these things where you really have to think outside of the partisan box and just not fall for the groupthink, because the groupthink is stupid. It's dumb.
Right.
So yeah, due process. It still clearly applies to people who are here illegally. If your crime is trespassing, then like I don't know, take a citizen. You're trespassing on someone else's property. Is it your right to be there? No, it's not. Should he be able to shoot you dead? Maybe, depending on the circumstance. If you're breaking and entering, then yeah, I'd say there's probable cause right there. But if it's like, oh, sorry, I didn't realize I was lost. I didn't get. You gotta give some people some grace, right? And besides which, like, these people are here at the invitation of our own government.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just
True.
extremely. We'll touch on this more with the Eighth Amendment, but very concerning because they can just go and accuse these people willy-nilly of all these horrible crimes, and they don't have to prove a thing because there's no citizen oversight of the process, because we've detached our minds to say, oh, they're basically subhuman and therefore they don't have rights, and we can compel them to witness against themselves, which, goodness knows what that looks like. And part of the other argument that I've seen brought to bear here is just the argument that, well, it's a time of public danger, see, and therefore it doesn't apply to them. It's not what the Fifth Amendment says, by the way. That's in the militia, like within the ranks of the militia. If you are a member of the United States militia and you're accused of a crime and you are in a time of war or public danger, like a real insurrection, then you might not always have time for a presentment or an indictment of a grand jury. But anyways, so these are human rights. Any other thoughts? Any thoughts? Any input you want to give on the Fifth Amendment?
I don't have too much to say. Just yeah, the like, or like in the worst case, like I feel like um these things are like for like the worst case. Like these rights are meant to protect like people in the worst case, and I don't have too strong of feelings on this because um like for example, I brought up civil asset forfeiture earlier, and that's something that's done to take away people's, like even citizens
Mhm.
like property, and but it's done with like, okay, the police officer has like a um I think it's sort of like probable cause that the money is connected to an illegal activity, is like connected to like maybe used for buying or selling or trafficking drugs or something, is a common one. And there, you don't sue the police, but you have to sue the money, and then the police have a program where they split it with the federal agents, and so it makes it convoluted. But this is already stuff being done to citizens, you know. So like non-citizens, like I see where people may feel that, oh, the like, you know, Fifth Amendment doesn't mean that because we see this here happening here, or we see this happening here, and uh, but no, the Fifth Amendment is is one is one of the things about due process, and due process is further affirmed than the 14th Amendment too. And I think in the 14th Amendment, it's not really talking about property and different things. But yeah.
Cool. Good thoughts. James, any thoughts on the Fifth Amendment? You know, being compelled to be witness against oneself, grand juries, due process.
Yeah, I, I I see the argument from these who, hey, they're here illegally, therefore they shouldn't be granted any protections under the law. I've even thought myself, if somebody broke into my house, they kind of have no rights, because it's my house. Um, but it's definitely different in the country. Because, well, one, I don't have a constitution in my house. And the country, we do. We have a standard that we agree upon. This is the standard that by which we judge. Everybody. Everybody has right to due process, to make sure that, like you were stating earlier, maybe somebody stumbles across somebody's property. I know. Yeah, I like to wander out in nature as much or more than anybody else. And if I crossed a boundary that I didn't realize I crossed, I wouldn't want to get shot. I wouldn't want to,
Right.
well,
Yeah.
you don't have any rights anymore because you crossed this boundary, So,
Or even if it's a dumb kid who's, sorry, I might have been that dumb kid who's was like intentionally
right.
trespassing on somebody's property because he wants to go see a cool waterfall or go try to climb some big rock or something. Who knows? But yeah,
Right.
people will do dumb things, and that doesn't mean that they deserve to die and have all their stuff taken away from them. One important difference, I would say, maybe we're not getting enough pushback here from people who are really pro the
Right.
government administration on the stance on illegal immigration. Because I'm totally pro border enforcement, and
Oh, yeah.
so like we should enforce our
Same.
borders, and if we had, then a lot of this would be a non-issue. But um,
Hmm.
uh, just to the point of somebody breaking into your house, it's kind of obvious that somebody who broke into your house has intent to like harm you or steal stuff, and so there's probable cause there. With somebody
Right.
who like overstayed a work visa or something like that, or you don't know they're just they don't have documents, and it's like there's no probable cause there to say why they're here.
Right.
I mean, it could even be the case that they are a child of a non-citizen and they were born and they never got a birth certificate. They're just undocumented.
Hmm.
You don't just go kill people or torture them into. Sorry, that might sound extreme, but like compelling them to be a
Right.
witness against themselves or whatever. That could that could go south without some serious checks on it. So let's go on to the Sixth
Exactly.
Amendment.
Okay.
Um, so, in all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed, which district shall have been previously ascertained by law, and to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation, to be confronted with witnesses against him, to have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. So, do we all agree that the Sixth Amendment, should apply to non-citizens? All right, 3, 2, 1.
Definitely
Yeah.
yes.
For sure.
I'm going to go ahead and start with what I think is maybe the strongest counter argument to this. Is I've heard people say, well, they shouldn't be able to get like a lawyer. They shouldn't be able to get the assistance of counsel. They shouldn't be able to have a jury and stuff. And like, it is true that I think like maybe one of the founding fathers said something to the effect of like juries were not intended for people who are not citizens of our country. But at the same time, like the express wording of the Constitution is all persons, and it doesn't make a distinction. The courts have consistently upheld that. Even if you're here illegally, yes, you get a right to a jury trial. You're accused of a crime or whatever, you get a jury. The problem here, some of the biggest problems are that for citizens and non-citizens alike, jury trials have been a vanishing institution. Used to be we had 100% of criminal cases tried by a jury, and today it's like 1%. It's night and day. It's been horrifying the degree to which they've dismantled this right. And of course, you don't always get the government doesn't always grant the right to counsel either, because they're like, well, that's too expensive, and you only get a lawyer if you're super poor and stuff. And so, like, anyway, that might actually disproportionately favor non-citizens there, actually, but depending on things. But because I've been in a situation where it's like they make you fill out a whole big thing and be like, oh, you got to prove that you're not making this much money before we dare to lift a finger to defend your rights and stuff. So, anyways, the Sixth Amendment has been attacked so ridiculously heavily. But and maybe there is. I'm just going to say this. I think there's a little bit of ambiguity maybe when it comes to an impartial jury of one's peers. What does that mean exactly? I think the Constitution is actually sufficiently clear on that point. It says an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed. It doesn't even say that like these have to be guys in your neighborhood, because if somebody goes and tries to like burglarize another neighborhood, then it's the people of that neighborhood. Actually, it's the place where the crime was committed. That's the jury that assembles. So, um, worrying about an impartial jury of peers, I think it's mainly a matter of just keeping our government accountable and making sure they're not mucking with the process. So, but yeah, I agree that you don't just allow people to go and accuse these guys of some crime and just have a judge decide it. Anyways, I have one more thought. I'm a little bit long-winded on this, but like administrative proceedings and civil litigation, deportation is typically handled under the heading of an administrative procedure, and they just use that as an excuse to say, "Oh, you don't have any rights. Sorry." Like in our last discussion, there was a distinction drawn between Article 1 courts and Article 3 courts. Article 1 courts, there's no such thing. Our government seems to think there's such a thing as an Article 1 court, and that's where all those ridiculous courts come into play, administrative and family courts. And basically, the bottom line is that governments should, if the government or any government entity is a plaintiff, it is by definition a criminal case. No ifs, ands, or buts. They can't just deny you due process just because they're like, well, we're going to call this a unicorn infraction. Yeah, just make up some weird title for it and then assume that magically makes your rights disappear. Anyways, so that's more general stuff, but I think it's. I'll stop blabbing about that. I'll leave that for another one. So big on jury trials. Anyways, any thoughts on the Sixth Amendment? Any input you want to give here? I want to make sure we have enough time here to get through.
I think I see the Sixth Amendment differently from you guys, you, Seth. When I see the Sixth Amendment, one of the things is like it talks about criminal prosecutions, and it I think what it is like the illegal immigration or immigration court is technically considered administrative, and it's not even considered a criminal thing, which I think goes against like what people say. Oh, these immigrants are committing crimes. It's immigration. Illegal immigration is a crime. And I'm not too sure about like the law and different things on this. But one thing that I think is a right people have, regardless of what the Constitution says. Like, one of the enable right is that right to a speedy trial, especially for immigration. Um, uh, where let's say someone just wants to, all right, just get it over with. Instead of having me detained in this detention camp, just sends me off to this country who will accept me. Then by all means, like, the person should have that right, because like, detention camp is to be detained, and if someone's like saying, hey, I just want to be sent to a country, I'm tired of sticking in this camp, and like that's like a prison, um, then yeah, by all means, they should be able to have as speedily do that. They shouldn't be um, detained like in like forever, like being forced by the U.S. to be detained, because then that could give rise to let's say that happening to a citizen, where someone's actually a citizen and they're detained forever. Um, and like, as much as I hate to admit it, like, if I had the choice being incarcerated in the US versus free in a different country, I'd choose free in a different country most of the time. Maybe depending on the country and how my incarceration is, but um, if that's what they're accused of, then I think they should speedily be able to get that. And it may not matter what the Constitution, like whether that's what the amendment says, but I believe it's something they should. Because I know with immigration stuff, it's complicated, and it allows like some non-lawyers to also work on the case. And so it also helps the backlog a bit but yeah, in any case, that are my thoughts on the issue.
All right, super. James, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, Scott brings up an interesting, that's an interesting thought on that. If they want to go somewhere else, as I've haven't really thought on that, but that's a good point. Somebody else say, hey, yeah, we caught you illegally in our country, whatever. If this other country wants you, and instead of hanging out here.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's a good point. Speedy trial. It'd be really nice to have that defined. I don't know if that's been defined by the court.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think nowadays there's such a backlog of cases, and I think that goes into what Seth mentioned about jury trials. Is like, no one wants to serve jury duty, then it takes a while to find a jury trial, and so I think Speedy is given a lot of leeway there. Um, um, I don't know how they define it though.
I would say we the people define what speedy means. If it's
Yeah,
speedy enough for we say, oh, that was good job, then we leave it at
Right.
that. But and if it's on
I,
us, we're not actually, you know, it's not like you volunteer for jury duty, you're selected. But even there, we could go more into that. But my take on it is there's no excuse for there not to be speedy and partial jury trials. That's something you could have 100% of the time. We used to do it. There's no good reason why we couldn't today. In fact, the reason why we don't do it today is because there are so many bad laws on the books, so many fastidious little infractions that they try to enforce just to bleed us dry and fine us for this and
Right.
that. But even the Magna Carta, the writers of the Magna Carta said, "Hey, King, you're not allowed to send officers to exact amercements from us. Amercements are fines. You're not allowed to fine even the peasantry without the consent of their peers." No,
mhm.
jury
Great.
trial. Great stuff. Great stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the
And
way
I
it used to
think
be in this country.
And I think consent of the peers maybe evolved to be like um, legislation, like Congress passes laws, or state legislators making laws. Hey, you can't speed here, type of thing, and that's all fine and dandy in my eyes. But yeah, it has led to immense backlog. Speedy now probably meaning what is actually possible. And so, because like, they still want justice to be served. So it's like, okay, we're going as fast as we can. So I think maybe they'll say, oh, that's speedy. Like, if it's as fast as
Yeah,
humanly possible.
yeah, and that's maybe one reason why you don't just set a thing on it, because maybe you do have a big case backlog and you got a lot to do.
Hmm.
We
Mhm.
give people in our government slack.
Hmm. Yeah.
The appropriations clause. It's anyways, people are forgetting
Right.
that right now too.
You bring up a good point where if we have such a backlog of laws or people, getting in, infractions or whatever, we have way too many laws on the books.
Yeah.
It should be okay. We should only be going to trial for, things that are just major.
Things that
We should,
actually matter, right? The
right.
government shouldn't be trying to fine us over fastidious, dumb little things, because if the local citizenry doesn't agree that that's an injury to
Right.
them, that they need to go and be busybodies and take somebody's money away, and also have a bunch of their people show up and take time out of their day to address, if it's not that big of
Mm-hmm.
a deal, then you just don't make it a crime. You don't criminalize it. you know,
Amen to
Well,
that. Amen
you
to
know.
that.
well, what specific things are you talking about here? Just specific examples, because I think I may disagree with you, Seth, a little bit.
Okay, I'll go ahead and give a pretty classic example. If you're going five over the speed limit, my opinion is like my opinion is we should return to citizen prosecution for stuff like that. A
Right.
citizen should actually file a complaint, say this person was driving recklessly, and there, boom, you already have your first witness,
Right.
and it's not a matter of an armed fundraiser who's just trying to get money for his local police department. And
Right.
so, like, if somebody perceives you as a public nuisance or as a threat, then it's the citizen who should report you, not some busybody officer of government. Like, if somebody's house is being raided or something, then yeah, you call the cops and you have them show up, and hopefully you have enough home defense that you can take care of the issue yourself. But if it's a matter of something a little fastidious, like, oh, I think he was driving a little too fast or driving too recklessly, like, if you really are that concerned about it enough to take it to court, then you do that. But if it's just a matter of like, hey, this guy is driving recklessly, then yeah, if he is endangering people, legitimately endangering them, then you go ahead
Mhm.
and you stick the fuzz on them, and they can observe with their own eyes too, and you have multiple witnesses, so you can triangulate and assess the severity of the situation, and then present it to a reasonable jury, and then they can make a judgment, right? But if it's just a matter of like, hey, you were walking too fast down the hall and you bumped into me, or or
Right.
you know, or
Yeah.
somebody's driving fast on a completely empty road or something that's like nobody's harmed.
Mhm.
I think we need to be careful not to be too fastidious about that kind of stuff. Not that we shouldn't have laws, not that we shouldn't have safety, but like there should be an enforceable mechanism where people can say this was endangering people's life. This was actually reckless. We need to hold this guy accountable before that he like actually kills somebody. Then yeah, you
Right.
go and you show up. You go report the incident. You go show up as a witness, and you actually you have a jury try the issue based on the evidences, and you go ahead and weigh that. And anyways, that's my take on it. Um,
Yeah, and I think I disagree there. I'm a little less I'm not really a libertarian. And so I guess it's like makes sense. I would disagree with you here that it's up to the citizenry too. I think in a way that has happened with the police, like, the police are there and they look out for speeders and different things. And I think there are cases where and especially with citizenry, I think it depends on the citizenry because I live in Florida. And so a lot of times people are like, oh, if I didn't, it's none of my business if even if someone's driving recklessly. I mean, actually, that's more the case because most of the people here drive recklessly, including sometimes myself.
if a
And
jury of your peers, sorry if I may interrupt, just a jury of I shouldn't interrupt, but a jury of your peers would acquit you of it, then maybe it's not a prosecutable offense. I don't know.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, but that's the thing. So um, going to a different example, so I usually police pull people over when they're going like 15 or so over, or 20 or 25. Then 20 is like when it becomes serious. Like another example you brought up was bumping into people in a hallway. And so
Maybe not the
some
best example.
I think that's a good example because I guess to someone, one thing could be bumping into someone, but to from another person's point of view, maybe it seemed to them that someone shoulder checked them, and
Maybe
and
it's
maybe
assault,
the
right?
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. And so like when we say these things like, oh, I don't think bumping someone to a hallway, like uh should be a crime. Well, like, it's sometimes it may appear that way to someone. Maybe that guy is just a really big guy and he did it on accident. And then like, maybe a trial is there to like for the jury to say, okay, did this guy do it on purpose or not? And where they really need to determine that fact because juries are there to determine facts. And so and maybe whether that happened. And I think with uh, speeding, cars are in this area where the founding fathers didn't have cars growing up, and so it ends up being a right. And I think the U.S. has like means with this because they help pave roads, like they keep roads maintained, and so uh, let's say. Like even from like a practical standpoint, as if like the taxes I pay go into like paving these roads that I use, or even if it's I don't use these roads. Let's say I no longer drive. Well, if the majority of people drive, then I got to accept that, hey, this money is being used for a purpose that is
Yeah,
meant
it's
for the
for
good.
a legitimate constitutional infrastructure project. I'm going to try to rein us in a little bit because I want to focus mainly on the illegal immigrant issue on this one. But like
Yeah,
just to kind of maybe wrap up our Sixth Amendment discussion here, I would say,
yeah.
you
And
know,
just giving you a warning, like I would like
oh yeah,
to be
you got
finished
to
in 15 minutes.
yeah,
I'll just
you
give
got to
you.
drop off in a few minutes. So let's go ahead and try to keep it. We'll just focus on
Or
these
we
last
could
questions. But
postpone it or something.
oh no, you're good. I think we can finish our last few questions here, but and wrap up at 9:15. But I was just going to say about the oh yeah about the jury trial and how do you get rid of the bad laws is nullification. If the jury can also
Yeah.
decide matters of law, if
Hmm.
it's a bad law, then it
Mhm.
shouldn't apply to them.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
I think God is pleased with the idea of actual local autonomy and self government, and
Hmm.
if the local
I
Absolutely.
agree.
people do not
Yeah.
agree that some edict, some potentate sitting in some palace somewhere decides that this should be the law, and the local
Mhm.
people don't agree, it's just like Magna
Mhm.
Carta saying, "Hey, you don't get to fine us over your arbitrary rules because we don't agree that we were harmed."
Right.
Hmm.
Anyways, so and if there are fines, the fines should actually go towards the people who are injured. They should go towards restitution
Mhm.
as opposed to just
Yeah.
Exactly.
fundraising, which is
Right.
Yeah.
unconstitutional. You can't just have agencies going out there getting their own funds. I'm probably going to breeze past the Seventh Amendment one here because it has to do with the matter of civil trial. I thought it would be kind of an interesting question. I'm not hugely concerned about it because
Can I?
honestly, but
Yeah. So I think is it the Eighth or the Ninth Amendment that's cruel and unusual punishment?
the eighth. So maybe if you're all okay
I
with it,
just.
we might just skip over the seventh because that's civil suits and can non citizens be parties to a civil
Mhm.
suit? I think of course they are. We don't want people who are non citizens, you know, doing waging civil
Yeah.
litigation against other non citizens in our courts. I don't think that's hugely appropriate. But
Yeah.
if we get to that point, we've already got some immigration problems we should actually address.
I
Um,
think with the eighth, I just want to preface by saying something I saw that's interesting is that I was watching a law video and they pointed out that it's cruel and unusual punishment. So like a punishment needs to be
Hmm.
both for like
Okay.
the amendment to apply. And I thought, oh man, that's like an interesting. I didn't realize the law was like that, where like because I think I saw in the news where a judge sentenced shoplifters to wash cars at a Walmart
okay,
because they shoplifted from a
So
Walmart, and that's an
maybe
unusual
unusual,
punishment.
right? Yeah,
that is
Um,
unusual.
and the judge postpones it till winter's over, so it's they're not washing it in winter, so it's not cruel. Um, um, and yeah, but like judges can charge like give people unusual punishments like that, and
yeah,
some punishments are cruel, like the death penalty. Like people call it cruel, but it's not unusual, and like it's
yeah.
used throughout the world.
So Ty has
Interesting
something to say
idea.
about that, but let's go ahead and just ask the question as a yes or no, and we'll dive into the discussion. So, Eighth Amendment, does it apply? Let me just go ahead and read it. Sorry, it's not very long.
Yes.
Excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. Should this apply to non-citizens? 3, 2, 1. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Okay, super. And Scott, just on the point of cruel and unusual, I would say, I would say that the plain English here says uh, it does say cruel and unusual, so you could try to parse it that way to say cruel and unusual. But and can also be used to specify a list, and then if you have, say you're applying both of these uh, adjectives distributively to the noun, then cruel punishments and unusual punishments would be the rendering of this. So I believe it's actually it would be the case that if a punishment is cruel, it's not allowable under the Constitution, or if it's unusual, it's also not allowed, right?
Oh,
Because the punishment should fit the crime is kind of the principle here, right?
yeah. And I think I'll agree to disagree because I'm just pedantic where and means and is logical. Maybe I'm too much into programming where it's like A and B
Well, it
or
depends on where
versus
you put
A
the
or B.
parentheses. Depends on where you put the
Uh,
parentheses, right?
well,
Cruel and
I don't
unusual
think
in
there's enough
parentheses
parentheses
punishments.
to make that happen in a program. But yeah,
Let's
we could agree to disagree on that.
let's rewrite the Constitution in Python with
Mm-mm.
pseudocode or something. Let's do that.
No, darn.
Mhm.
See if
And
it
That froze
compile.
up.
I like to think lawyers are similar to programmers, but maybe that's just me thinking
Lawyers.
highly of myself.
I I'll tell you what lawyers do with law. They actually make sure that it doesn't compile, that it's not internally consistent, and that way, not all lawyers, but this is a general practice among lawyers and judges, is that if you have a giant corpus of law like we have today that is not internally consistent, it would not compile. It would not. There's no sensible semantic parse of the whole thing. It just does not
Yeah,
agree with itself. Then the
I agree
purpose
with you on
behind
there.
that, both in terms of the written laws on the books as well as the case law, so called, the judicial precedent, the idea there is that they could go sample and cherry pick. They'd be like, oh, well, this guy's a political dissident, so let's go ahead and sample from the cruel and unusual side of things. Oh, this guy is a friend. Let's go ahead and let him off easy. And that way, there's not equal treatment under the law. And that's one of the huge problems with having so many laws on the books. Um, but yeah, I would submit it's a fairly straightforward matter of no, you don't get to maltreat people. The punishment should fit the crime. You don't get to escalate. Don't abuse people. It's kind of really obvious and
Mhm.
straightforward. But for some reason, there are people who are like, yeah, get rid of them. Go beat them with a stick. Go, they shouldn't be here. And honestly, that strikes me as just the kind of guy who's like, you know, had way too much booze. You know, he's hooked on booze and has the wife beater on and is a wife beater and stuff. And is just somebody who's got these rage fits and just wants to harm people. And because they cut him off in traffic, so he comes out and tries to beat him up or something like that. It's that kind of anger, that kind of outrage, that kind of idiocy that leads to collateral damage, which is what is ultimately going to come back around and kill us. That's what's going to erase our rights, and this is what I see everyone's getting pushed into. I used to wonder about the Jaredites. How did they get sucked into that vortex of anger? And I'm like, oh, now I see, because it's happening. And people are
Mm-hmm.
just getting more and more angry because they're forgetting all about these defendant rights. They're forgetting about, my opinion, is this is how you love your neighbor. Uh, I'm going to go ahead and go out. This is not on a limb. If you don't uphold people's defendants' rights, then you don't love your neighbor. You don't love your enemy. Because this is all about loving your enemy. Like, if you want to learn how to love your enemy, look at defendant rights. Because, by definition, a defendant is accused of a crime. Or in the
Right.
case of the Fourth Amendment, suspected, right? But even there, it's like, if you don't uphold people's dignity and their rights, then we just don't have civilization anymore.
Mhm. Yeah. Right.
So, anyways, any other thoughts on the Eighth Amendment?
Not
No.
for me.
Okay,
Yeah.
super.
Pretty much. It's cut and dried. It's pretty clear.
Okay, I think we already covered. So this is question number 8 here. What does it mean for a right to be unalienable? You already mentioned it. You already creamed that, knocked one out of the park. I think it was you,
Yeah.
James, that said it was. There's no ambiguity there. You can't. And I would submit Article 3, Section 2, Clause 3 of the Constitution says the trial of all crimes shall be by jury. It's a shall. It's not you can waive your right to a jury. It's if you're accused of a crime, it has to be by jury. Number 9 here, I think here has some interesting ramifications. What are the predictable consequences of leaving borders unsecured? So this is open format, so we can address it a little bit more expeditiously. And I would submit, with hindsight right now, of seeing the two-party system, they're joined at the hip, and seeing the two parties, the Gadiantons in government, they're like, hey, let's have the Democrats invite all these illegal immigrants in here. Yeah, and then that'll make the Republicans super mad, and then those Republicans will be so mad and so glad to get rid of those people that they will light the Bill of Rights on fire just to get rid of them. And that's exactly what we're seeing happening. And that appears to be the intent behind it too. That appears to be like the reason why the powers that be wanted illegal immigration. It was maybe, arguably, not unheard of, in part so that they could blue shift the candidates and get more of the populist candidates elected, more of the people who are just not very scrupulous. But even illegal immigrants, not illegal immigrants, but the immigrant population from Latin America, they've tended to vote conservative because a lot of them are like working people and stuff. Anyways, it's not that there's like, let me just put it this way: the partisan dichotomy there is a false dichotomy, and we're seeing them work in unison. And if I were the devil and I wanted people to, if I wanted the Republicans in particular to light the Bill of Rights on fire, this is probably how I would do it. It's going to make them so sick of all the illegal immigration, all the DEI, all the LGBTQ stuff, all the men and women's sports stuff. Cram that stuff on them, get them super angry about it, super hyped on social media, and then have somebody who comes in and claims to be solving the problem, and oh, don't worry, we'll get rid of all those bad people, and then you just normalize cruelty. You normalize denying people their defendant rights, and then what goes around comes around. This is going to come for us too.
And I think I remember there was something I was going to mention earlier that I forgot. I remembered it when you mentioned this thing about level tempting, and like if it's even more than that, just that because the U.S. has been involved in different things overseas, and so there are certain countries like Russia, who have spies in the U.S. Um, who have been shown to manipulate past elections, and bribe certain officials and who are in office currently. And so this is a very real threat. This goes beyond, this is people wanting to harm the U.S. And the United States, and for whatever reason they have, and um, maybe maybe God's allowing it because people in the U.S. have been mean. I remember, or something. I don't know, but uh, like, uh, but I think it's important to know that, hey, these are coming from real people, and real people are being incited by other people. This is a very news organizations are news is being manipulated. People are following traditional Russian talking points. That is a thing, and at least from my point of view, it is. And so I just think it's important to realize, hey, a lot of these things, I got to be extra careful about what I listen to on the media right now, and think first, does this make sense? Okay, yes, it does. Or wait, this doesn't really add up. So maybe I'm not, I don't know whether to take it as truth or not. Because when you hear something a lot, you end up sometimes thinking it's true. Um, but yeah, that's my thoughts on the issue.
Good. yeah, James, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, could you rephrase or could you restate the
The
question again?
question number 9: what are the predictable consequences of leaving our borders unsecured?
Oh, yeah, I
Well,
didn't address that at all.
You did. You were talking about the people who are here who are saboteurs. They're a national security
Yeah,
threat.
right.
yeah,
This is not a controversial issue, right?
yeah.
There
And
are
those
a lot
people
of
are maybe here legally, those people, because diplomats and things, and
some of
that's
them.
just how
Yeah, you can have a mix.
international relations work. But it's still within the spirit of the question, I guess.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. I thought you did a fantastic job of answering. But
Well, one of the big arguments is the fentanyl thing, the drugs
Mhm.
and things
oh yeah,
that
yeah.
are coming out. Child trafficking, human trafficking. That's a huge problem, especially um, in Mexico, where the cartel has such a huge influence there. Um, it's just criminals basically running. Well, I can't say they're running the country, but they have a huge influence there, and they can kind of do what they want. They can, um, they got a lot of corruption there. I'm no expert, but what I hear is they have a lot of corruption down there. They can just bribe cops. They can do stuff like that, and we don't want any part of that. We don't want any. We don't want the drugs. We don't want the trafficking. We don't want the problems from Mexico coming here. And so, yeah, we need to have a secure border. It seems like we don't have near as a big a problem on the northern border, at least not that we hear about. I'm sure we got,
Yeah,
we probably have stuff
there are
going
some
on up there
challenges.
too. Right, right,
I
right.
heard
Yeah,
I heard stories of the fentanyl from us being a problem for them.
oh yeah.
We're the
So
opposite. We're the
they want to build a
yeah,
border wall between the United States and
yeah,
Canada now.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we're gonna bring this in. I think those are really great points. Yeah, there are national security issues. There are risks. Um, and let's go to number 10. How can citizens provide oversight to prosecutions and uh, and deportation hearings involving non-citizens? And my take on that is just follow the recommendations we've made here on this panel. Actually recognize their human rights. Actually recognize the Bill of Rights does apply to them. And to anybody who's concerned about that, like, no, it doesn't mean that they're immune to deportation. That's not one of their
Yeah.
immunities. United States citizens are immune to deportation from the United States, but non-citizens are not. But just giving them due process, it doesn't mean that justice won't be done. In fact, it helps ensure that justice will be done because that's the due
Right.
process the Constitution specifies. And
Right.
amendments 5 and 6 in the Bill of Rights with the grand jury and the trial jury, respectively, that is how you provide citizen oversight of the process. And with warrants, even you'd say, hey, do you have a warrant? Oh, he's got a warrant. Okay, ICE has a warrant. They go abduct their guy. Yep, he's accused of some horrible thing, and they have a grand jury indictment and stuff by the citizens
Mm-hmm.
themselves, and the citizen trial. If you have all those elements in the system 100% of the time, you can only guarantee that you're not, trampling on these people's rights if you actually do this 100% of the time. And that's my insistence here.
Right.
It's just, no, you don't separate families without a jury trial. You don't abduct people, take their stuff, any of that stuff. Normalize that. Anyways, maybe I'll just end with this. It reminds me of the poem of, they came for the Jews. First they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a Jew. They came for
Yep.
the non-citizens, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a non-citizen. And
Yeah.
they came for the,
Exactly.
I don't know, who knows, maybe the drag queens. They came for the LGBTQs, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't one of them. And pretty
Right.
Yeah.
soon, it's going to come down to us, and it's like, and then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak up for me. So we got to speak up for even our worst enemies here. The Lord is testing us. Satan's attacking us. He's using the two-party system to attack us. He's using this deception and the spirit of contention to drive us apart and get us to reject our rights and our responsibilities. Scott, I recognize you got to drop off. I don't want to hold you hostage here.
All right. Thanks. I'll see ya. Thank you.
Thanks
It's
so
been
much.
wonderful.
Yeah, it
Sorry
has been.
for if I interrupted you guys at all when you were
Oh,
talking at all.
you were great. I was the
Yeah.
most interrupting-y. I'm pretty sure if we had an AI moderator here, that would be the finding. I get
All
like
right.
10 demerits for interruptions or something.
All right.
Thanks so much
Thank
for
you,
joining us.
Seth and James. You were both wonderful. Have a good one. Bye bye.
Likewise, you too.